Hi, I'm James Bell and I just graduated from Marion High School. I would like to welcome you to the Weaver exhibit here at the Marion Library. I've been working with people from Taylor and IWU this summer, and we've put together a very big exhibit. It took a lot of work, a lot of effort, some ups, some downs, but it was fun overall, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
And I was born out in the community called Weaver, Indiana. And the community was named after John Henry Weaver. He had a grocery store out there, and he was more or less the, if you want to say, one of the richest guys in the community. As I remember, of course, there could be a few mistakes, and I know I've made them before, on where people lived. And this board, I had it made for our family reunion, and I would take it to them and show them where their heritage was. It shows the grocery store, and it sat on the west side of the road. And that was John Henry Weaver's grocery store. And then beside that, going west, what we call the crossroads, where 600 South intersects with 300 West. And at 300 West, if you go north all the way, it takes you through Michaelsville. And then, as I remember, there was a blacksmith shop. At least I was told there was, and it was owned by Carlos Pettiford. And I made a mistake. I thought it was owned by Henry Cobb, but I was wrong. And right near it was the post office. I heard there's a way station. And a little bit further down is where the Johnny Pettiford home was. Still on the north side of 600 South, is now known as the Clearwater Park Road, and it was going west. And down where it was a little of a T road, which took you south towards Radley, I believe. That's where the Arnold Burton family home was, and I forget how many children they was in the family. And then coming back east on the south side was the Weaver School, and they used to have a play called the Old District School. And that was something that people from Marion all around would go back out there, and they performed it in the one-room school. The 300 West, Ira Smith had a house there, and going further south was where Harvey Stewart had a home. Now you go across the road to the other side, which is 300 South, and right there was what was known at one time as a racetrack. And a guy named Alf Smith owned it. But later on it's the Von Casey farm. And then coming on east on that side of the street was the Bethel School there. Then a little further down across from that on the north side of 600 South, or the Clearwater Park Road, there was the Masonic home. And I think that's what the men owned. It was on the right-hand side of that road. And then on the left-hand side, going the same way, behind the Hills Chapel Church, which was on the Masonic Eastern Star part, That's where the church was. Then behind that was more Masonic. Terrence Faulkner Farm. And then there's a place called Lice J. Hill, north of that. And then next was a Wallace Jones Farm. And then further north of that was Thomas and Catherine Gulliford. And then coming on west to the 300 West, which was called the Crossroads, down at the intersection. Way up north was a Cora Mills home. I was told that by one of the neighbors. And then coming on further south was the Charlie Ward Farm, which is still there. And then coming on south, right there at the crossroad, was the John Henry Weaver home. That's where it was. And to the east of that was the cemetery. That's the Weaver Cemetery. And at one time it had a entranceway to it. Even had a arch and everything, but weather and time has deteriorated it. But it's still kept up, I think, by the township trustees. But to my knowledge, that's my recollection of Weaver, Indiana, named after John Henry Weaver. I played football in high school, played independent softball, tried to play baseball, but I could never play basketball because I couldn't dribble the basketball. You need to dribble. But I was pretty active in sports. And when I graduated in June of 1948, I went in service in August. I served a year, came out, then the Korean War started, and I got caught up out of reserves. And when I got to Korea, all we had is what was known as a Pusan perimeter, and that was not much. Had the Chinese jumped in there then, they could run us all out with just sheer manpower. And here's the irony in the way of military. I thought I was pretty tough. When I got out of high school, I tried to join the Marines, and they told me, well, we have our quota. I didn't know whether it meant race or just quota, period. So I had to join the Army. Then I had a nephew, lived in Gary, Indiana. And when he got out of high school, he came to live with us here in Marion. And the story I got that he and a few of his buddies went down to join the Marines. And he was the only one that passed. But then he got killed in Korea. Killed in Vietnam, killed in Vietnam. So the irony is I tried to join. We got our quota when he joined. There was none, and somehow God told I got back, but he got killed in Vietnam. So
What was his name?
Thomas Jefferson Fears Jr. His name was on the courthouse around the thing on a post down there. And I had a brother served in World War II. He made it back. I had another brother in Korea. He made it back. And I had a brother-in-law. He was in Korea. He made it back. And I think we were all there, the three, myself, my brother, my brother-in-law, at the same time, but we didn't know it till we got back home because we were in different places in Korea.
Wow.
And when I went over by ship, 14 days going, 14 days coming back. And some of them, I think my brother, he flew over, and they stopped in Hawaii, then kept on going, but we didn't stop anywhere. 14 days. Several of them, different ones, but the biggest one was the Pettiford, then had a Gulliford and Stewart, Jones, Mitchell, and Shoecraft, and there was a bunch of different reunions that was out there in Weaver, because that was our connection to Weaver. That they would go back out there, and I can remember they would sit down and talk and laugh and sing and even have a little bit of service out there. But nowadays that's taboo with the society we have now. The people say, well, that's old stuff. That's old stuff. And they used to have a lady named Stella Hayes. She would make some homemade iced tea in a big old crock. And she would sit there and dip it out and give it to you. And you talk about some good homemade iced tea. She did it. Then when we used to have ice cream, we had what you call a cold pack, real thick, insulated outside and a metal container inside with ice cream, and they would keep it cold. But that was just fun time. We used to play games and stuff like that. But we just sat and fellowshipped. We didn't have all this music, boom, 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 bang, 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 you know. Sat down and learned who you heard. Time, that's where the Pettiford reunion was. Then it got to be such, that was the home of Mildred and Fred Beck. That's where they had a reunion down there. That was the Pettiford reunion. And then it went down to the Masonic home because it was much bigger. And even before that, I can remember the Pettiford reunion was across 35 and 22, across from where the Wilson farm is now. And the guy named Lewis Jackson had an airplane. He would take people up a ride. The farm was that big out there. And that's who the Jackson Library is named after, out Indiana Wesleyan University, that family. And I was there when they had the dedication. And but Lewis and his wife, they've already passed away. And he taught school back there in Marion, a place called D.A. Payne at one time. Look, that was an appliance place there is now, across from Mike Anderson Dodge. But he was a pilot, and I think he was even one of the trainers for the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. And he and his wife Violet went over to Ohio, got involved in the educational system there. They made a mint, and at one time I saw in a magazine where he had designed a plane. You could fly it, or you can drive it on the highway, fold the wings up, drive it on the highway. So that was part of he was part of the, might say, Weaver connection to a degree too. And then a lot of us here in Marion, they don't know their heritage, but that's where a lot of their families came from. And ours came from, the Stewart family came from a place called Patrick County, Virginia. And it came up through Ohio and Indiana and stuff like that, and and they were not all poor people, and they were not slaves. When you get to the census back in the 1800s and 1900s, early 1900s, they would list how much farm land they owned and how much money they had, stuff like that. So all of them was not poor. But before I started grade school, so it had to be in the early 30s, say about 34, 35, because my sister, she was born in 33 out there in Weaver. So that's that we moved to town. And yeah, I can remember when you had to sit up in the balconies of theaters, so sit on the sides of the theaters. They only had one floor. A lot of restaurants you couldn't go into. As far as sitting down, you could carry out. Same way in the service when I was in Texas. We had our own service clubs and stuff such as that. Sat in the back of the bus, even in uniform. And starting at St. Louis, but known as Gateway to the South, they had a big old iron gate. and we called it the Iron Gate. You sat behind there, and even in uniform didn't make any difference, man. But as far as the letter carrier part, most of that was gone by the time that I got to be a carrier. Well, a lot of people, they came in from different parts of the county as well as different parts of the country, different states. And I letter care for nearly 32 years. And in those days, people more or less looked out for each other. Relationships were good, and you didn't have to worry about somebody stealing something for you because we was all in the same boat as far as economics were concerned. And I got to know the people on the mail route, and I get to go sometime to weddings, and sometimes go to funerals and wakes and stuff like that, or even birthday celebrations on my mail route. This one family, they would invite me in sometime for lunch, even though I wasn't supposed to, unless I told the people at the post office what I was going to do. But they invite me for lunch, you know, and sit there and eat, get a half an hour or so, and take on off. But I got a close relationship with the people in the postal business, and I tell people nowadays, if a letter carrier is like a bartender and something else, if he told everything he knew, somebody'd probably beat him up because of the things that we saw happen in different families and stuff. You just take to you with you to your grave. You don't tell people about what happened. But that was it. And I loved getting out and walking. Then we had to go to vehicles, and that would take away part of the walking. I'm just a physical type person. I love to do things I'd rather discuss in private, because what I was involved with is more than what they have out there now. And I knew that one person, I'll call his name, that he never got the credit, or doesn't get the credit now, for what we did in those days. His name was C.D. Banks, Claudius D. Banks. Now, he was a World War II vet, and he was Mr. NAACP at that time, but I'd rather discuss it in private and let you know some of the things that he led the fight for. But today, you don't see his name. If I did, I can see that lady walking, and she used to teach back there at D.A. Payne. She'd ride the streetcar or the bus to 36 in Washington and walk all the way back there. And then when school was out, walk all the way back up to Washington Street. And she was a member of Bethel when I was going there. She was a wonderful lady, wonderful lady. And at the time she was teaching, she couldn't get a job in the public school system. She could teach back at D.A. Payne. Then later on, when things kind of broke down, she was a special ed teacher, and they had I think she had some little trailers down near the Coliseum. But yes, I knew her very well, very well. She was a gracious lady, wonderful. Attended as a child, and as I remember, it was an old wood frame structure, and they didn't have electric lights at that time. They had little kerosene lamps that they put on a little pedestal from the wall and have lights. But then I think it was 1955 that a rainstorm came and lightning struck the church, and it burnt down. Because I remember we lived in town, and someone gave us a call about the church being on fire. So I drove my dad and myself out there, and clear back as far as intersection of 37, 35, and 22, you could see the reflection in the sky. So when we got out there, you could just see it just slowly dying, the frame of the piano, and you couldn't put it out to nothing. And then they rebuilt it, I think, in '57. And William Perkins was the minister out there at that time. But, and there used to be a big crowd out there because there was a lot of people lived there and they went to church there. And more or less the church in those days was the focal point of society. To go to Bethel 10th in Nebraska for quite a few things, because I was a member there from about, I'm trying to think, it was 1952 up until maybe it's a couple years ago. I decided to start. And of course, the college church is right in my backyard anyway. You only take about 2 minutes to get. Yes, I go to the College Wesleyan Church, and Pastor Steve DeNeff, he is a master at preaching and teaching at the same time, and I love to hear him. Love to hear him. And when I first started going there, you didn't get to hear too many amens. People, I guess that's just the way they were, always quiet. But when I hear him preach and teach, and we agree on something, you will hear me say amen, not just amen. I let people know, and I've been complimented by him and his wife and some other people out there. I've got one philosophy in life, and there's something that apply, well, maybe a couple of things. If it isn't yours, let it alone. If it ain't yours, let it alone. And then don't treat people in a mean and nasty way, because life is too short.
Right, please.
I am Martina Casey. But we visited my grandmother in Weaver. We go out there. In fact, they had the family reunion at her house on the Galliford farm out there. And the family, her family, wanted to see her, and they thought it would be nice if they had a family reunion and everybody tried to come, which they did. And they used to have the reunion out there. And I can remember as a girl, my grandmother would tell my mother, you won't have to worry about bringing a lot of stuff. I'm going to cook the chicken and dumplings. I'll do that. I'll take care of that. And Minnie, which was her daughter, will take care of the other. And you can bring whatever you want. And we would go out there for the reunion. We didn't have a car, but there was a white family that lived not too far from us. He was a fireman, and he would take us out there. And I can remember my mother taking one of the big laundry baskets, and she'd have all the food and stuff in there. And we would go out there. And on the farm, my Uncle George, my dad's brother, and his sister Minnie lived with my grandmother. My grandfather had passed, of course. He was a Civil War veteran. And but they lived on the farm. They had hogs out there, they had chickens. He had 3 of the prettiest horses I believe I've ever seen. I remember that Sunday we went to church, as always, and the minister, Reverend H.D. Saunders, was the minister. And he got up, he opened the service, and he says, now, just relax. And he said, now anybody that comes in here that's not supposed to be in here, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And he had his gun laying right there beside his Bible. So after the service, was over, we had a good service, no problems. He preached a good sermon and all. And we left. When we got outside the church, the militia was out there guarding the area where the one boy that was hung, his family, he lived there. And they wouldn't let anybody go down on Nebraska Street, past that house. And this couple, the man and his wife, was in the car, and he was bound and determined. He's going to turn that corner and go down there. And the soldier told him to halt. And he kept going. And he threw that gun in that window and said, "I told you to halt." He liked to turn the car over, getting out of there. And that was it. But I think that one of the nice things about the library now, that they've got the history and a lot of things in the library now. And it's very interesting. And I think it would be good for parents to take their children up there and let them see, because a lot of parents don't know a lot about this history, and it would be nice for them to know.
Well, I'm sitting here talking with you, James. Do you want to introduce me?
This is Miss Norma Johnson, genealogist for our whole family that we've been researching these past couple months. And so I just want you to tell us a little bit how you're connected to Weaver.
Okay, well, my grandmother was Orinda Pettiford Miller, and she was one of 19 children born to Martha and Joseph Pettiford. Martha was a weaver. Her father, Henry, and her grandfather, John, were the early settlers in the Weaver settlement. And they traveled here from Granville County, North Carolina. And they came here prior to the outbreak of the Civil War. There was some legislation passed in the southern states in the early 1850s, as the Civil War was about to begin, that free African Americans were being kidnapped and sold into slavery. So the Pettifords, the Weavers, the Stewarts, and a number of other families in that area were free. And along with guidance from Quakers and other abolitionists, they left North Carolina and traveled west to the Midwest to avoid being sold into slavery.
Do you know why Weaver was picked though? Like, was it already like a certain settlement, they just came in and then overtook it, or how that worked? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know how they picked that area, but if you look at the trajectory of how they traveled, there were no freeways like it is now. So it took years for them to get here.
Okay.
So leaving North Carolina and leaving the county in which Edmund Pettiford, who is my oldest ancestor, he came from Granville County, which is in the eastern part of North Carolina. They moved, when I looked at their traveling area, they moved from Granville west to Stokes County to Wake County, which is where Joseph Pettiford's father was born. And then they left Wake County and moved further west to Greensboro, which is Guilford County. And then from Guilford County, they moved on to the outskirts of Virginia and North Carolina, Tennessee. And when they got to Tennessee, they got to Kentucky. And then they got to the Ohio River. and that's in Ohio, of course, and it's right there on the border between Kentucky and Ohio. And Joseph Pettiford was born in a place called Chillicothe, Ohio, and that's one of the first places that I found them outside of North Carolina on the census record. That was like around 1860. But now some of Edmund's children didn't stop in Ohio. They came on to Indiana, and I found a Beverly Pettiford in Indiana as early as 1860.
Okay.
And he was living in Weaver. So what looks like to me is that they kind of split up. Some stayed in Ohio, some stayed in Michigan, some went to Illinois, and some came to Indiana. All they knew is that they just did not want to be in the South.
Right, yeah.
When the war broke out.
It was not good down there. It was not good down there.
It was not good down there.
Yeah.
And some of them fought in the Civil War. In Indiana, you had Jesse Pettiford, who you'll find in Jennings County, Indiana, who fought in the Civil War. His wife, Anna Blanks Pettiford, received a pension from his service because he didn't die in action, but he died while he was still a service person. Okay. And she had children, and so she was given a pension for him.
Okay, that's good. So, as we have been, researching and doing all this research, and we came to you as one of the main sources. So I want to know why did you get into the genealogy, and what made you want to learn about your family history into the depth that you have done it?
Well, it had more to do with the stories that I kept hearing from my mother and my grandmother's brothers. Now, my grandmother, by the time I was old enough to have an appreciation for our history, my grandmother was had Parkinson's, and really her voice would not allow her to do a lot of talking. And then, of course, she died when I was like 15, 16, something like that. And so, but it was her brothers who had these stories that just fascinated me. We never were slaves. We were free people.
Right.
Grandpa, and they would say things like, Papa was born in Chillicothe. And that's how they would talk.
Right.
My Uncle Robert, Uncle Foy, Uncle Cash, Uncle Robert was the best storyteller, and so he would say, yeah, they came in 13 covered wagons, and they was getting out of North Carolina because they didn't want to be slaves.
Right.
I said, well, Uncle Robert, why were they free? How was they free? They was just free people. I didn't know that why or how they became free until I started doing the genealogy. And when I went on the census records and I saw that their initial FCP was across from their name, that's when I asked the librarian in the Mormon genealogy library, I asked her what that meant, and she told me that it meant free colored people. She said they were never slaves.
Right.
And she said if they had been slaves, the names would not have been on the census record. They would have been property. So Uncle Robert and Uncle Cash, by the time I was really interested, they still were able to, they didn't have dementia or anything, and they were able to tell me. So one of the first questions I asked them was, did they remember their grandfather?
Right.
And they said, yeah, they did remember their grandfather. Uncle Cash said he was 10 when his grandfather died. And his grandfather was John Milton Pettiford. Okay. And I went to the records down in Indianapolis, found a death certificate for John Milton Pettiford, and his father's name was Edmund. Okay. So that was how I was able to find. And then I found an obituary for Edmund Pettiford that said that he was believed to be a little over 100. and that he had like 100 and some grandchildren and 13. It said he had 21 grandkids. I mean, it told all of this information. But the most interesting thing about genealogy to me is the stories that you get from just a little bit of information, like obituaries. I mean, I know it sounds gross, but obituaries tell you a lot. They tell you who the kids are, who survived the person that died. Tells you something about what the person did for a living. Tells you who they were married to. Tells you where they were born and you know when they were born. Because on Edmund's obituary, he was born in 1795. He was married to Sally, and he was married to another woman, but he didn't have children with that woman. He only had children with his first wife, Sally. And it tells, in his obituary, it tells when he came to Indiana and was living in Fairmount. And so that was, and then it said that, you know, all the grandkids he had, didn't name them, it just said how many he had. How many grandkids he had, which one of them was my great grandfather.
Yeah, because I know with me doing this genealogy, it's like you do the obituaries, and then you click one thing, and then you get another piece, and you get another piece, and another piece, and it just coming all together, and it's like a nice relief because there'd be some dead ends too.
Oh yeah, the dead ends. Yeah, the dead ends are frustrating, but I tell you, it's so rewarding when you make the connections. I used to have a cousin, her name was Susan Hall, and I have to mention her because I miss her so much. Because she and I used to compare notes, and she was a Pettiford from North Carolina that I connected with on the internet, and then we did like two big what we call mega reunions with Pettifords from all over the country that came to this reunion. Well, Susan got sick, and she died, and boy, I miss her, because every time I make a connection, I want to pick up the phone and call Susan and say, girl, do you know? Because she had the same kind of memory that I have. It just clicked. It was like a Rolodex in her head. She could tell you, you know, and if I had a missing link, she had it. And if she had a missing link, I had it. But, you know, I'm doing the best I can without her, but I still miss her.
I'm sorry to hear that. So the reunions, you've been to them. How are they? Are they lively? They fun?
Oh, they're fun.
Tell me about those.
That's me and my sister. That's the reunion. That's the best one that illustrates how much fun we had. Because that's my sister sitting on the ground. I don't know who this little girl is, but that's my sister and that's me. And this was at the Beck Farm. And you just came and you ate and you played with your cousins. And the best part about the reunions is that you wait all year long to see the cousins that live so far away. I have cousins that I'm still, you know, connected to from when we grew up together. My cousin Brenda Jackson Murphy, she and I, you know, we're growing old together, you know. But we used to play together at the reunion. Joyce Pettiford Coleman, she's another one of my cousins that I played with at the reunion. And so even though you had first cousins that you grew up with, you had all these other cousins that were like second, third, fourth, and whatever. And these were all cousins that you played with at the reunion. And now my kids, who are adults, and they have kids, they grew up the same way, going to the reunion every third Sunday in August.
Now, were all the reunions on the Beck Farm, or like when did it stop being on the Beck Farm?
I can't remember when it stopped being on the Beck Farm, but the reunion is now in its 100th year. So it was started by Martha and Joseph Pettiford. Then it went, when they passed, then it went to Mildred Beck. which was their oldest son's daughter.
Okay.
And then it went to the Masonic home, and I went to both the Masonic home and the Beck farm. But I was living in California when they moved it from the Beck farm, I believe, to the Masonic. So I would say either it had to be in probably in the 71 or 72, but that history is available. I just don't have it in my head right now. And then from the Masonic home in 2017, we moved it to Mater Park.
Okay.
And we moved it to Mater Park because it just got so big that we needed more room.
Yeah.
And we needed a place where we could, where the kids could feel free to play. They had more space to play and stuff. So.
Okay, so that August is coming up. So that 3rd August is going to be at Mater Park.
Yes, and it's and we because it's the 100th anniversary. It's more than just the reunion. This year is the centennial celebration. So for the whole week of that, leading up to that 100th anniversary, we have different events going on. And one of them is the Marion Library special exhibit, which starts on August the 12th. Then you have the book signing that's being hosted by Beyond Borders in Kokomo. One of the cousins, Carlene Carlisle, wrote a book about her journey to adopt her son. And so that's another event that's going on. And then Saturday morning is our memorial service to give honor to the ancestors, as well as to talk about where we came from and where we're going to.
Right.
The future of this reunion for the next 100 years is in the hands of the young people who planned the events for this year. And so we will have a balloon release that morning, and then that evening we have the big banquet celebration, and then Sunday we have the cookout and the panoramic picture. Everybody
That sounds like a
wants
lot
to
of
be in the picture.
I
If
bet.
they don't come to nothing else, they want to be in that
The picture,
picture.
just-
Yeah, the big picture.
Everybody get dressed and come just for the picture.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for sharing this information, this knowledge with us, and can't wait for you to see how this goes.
I can't wait either. I'm so excited. And I want to thank all of the students from IWU and Taylor University who participated in researching and putting together the celebration at the library, because that's going to give people who may not know the exact connection to the Pettiford family, it'll give them a chance to see, oh, I know that person.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was kin to them.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun.